The crowd at Silver Creek's annual harvest dance fell silent as she stood in the doorway, her ragged dress a stark contrast to the colorful gowns that adorned the other women. Henrietta Rose had traveled 200 miles across the harsh New Mexico territory with nothing but the tattered clothes on her back and a heart full of desperate hope. It was 1877, and this town represented her last chance at a new beginning. Whispers rippled through the gathering like wildfire. Ladies in fine silk dresses covered their mouths and giggled behind lace fans. Men in suits exchanged knowing glances, as if confirming what they already believed, that this woman didn't belong among them. Henrietta clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, the patches and tears in her dress suddenly feeling like brands marking her as an outsider. 6 months ago, she had been the daughter of a respected Boston merchant. Now, after her father's financial ruin and subsequent death, she was nothing but a penniless drifter seeking refuge with a distant aunt she'd never met. "Well, look what the wind blew in," a woman's shrill voice cut through the whispers. "Did you lose your way to the beggar's quarter, dear?" More laughter followed, sharp and cutting. Henrietta felt heat rising to her cheeks, but she held her head high. She had endured far worse than mockery on her journey west. "That's the dress I'll remember forever." The deep voice silenced the room. A tall figure moved through the crowd, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor. Clayton Xavier stood before her, his weathered cowboy hat in hand, revealing sun-bleached hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. Unlike the other men in their formal attire, he wore simple trousers, a clean shirt, and a vest that had seen better days. "Beg your pardon," Henrietta asked, uncertain if she'd heard him correctly. Clayton smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "That dress. It's traveled a long way, hasn't it? Just like you." He extended his hand. "Clayton Xavier, most folks just call me Clay." Henrietta hesitated before accepting his hand. "Henrietta Rose, I'm looking for Margaret Whittaker. I was told she lives in Silver Creek." A shadow passed over Clayton's face. "Miss Whittaker passed last winter. Influenza took half the town." He studied her face, noting how it fell at this news. "You're kin to her, her niece," Henrietta whispered, her last hope crumbling. "I've come all this way for nothing." The music had resumed, but the dancers gave them a wide berth, still stealing curious glances. "Not for nothing," Clayton said firmly. "Silver Creek could use more folks with the determination to travel so far on their own." He looked around at the judgmental faces watching them. Folks who judge a person by their courage rather than their clothing. He offered his arm to her. "Would you honor me with a dance, Miss Rose?" Henrietta blinked in surprise. "In these rags, I couldn't possibly, in that dress that tells a story of survival better than any book I've ever read." His eyes held a sincerity that made her breath catch. "Besides, I'm not much for fancy myself." Something in his honest gaze made her place her hand on his arm. "One dance, Mr. Xavier, though I warn you my feet are as weary as my spirit tonight." As Clayton led her to the dance floor, the whispers continued, but they seemed less important now. The town's disapproval faded into the background as he placed one hand respectfully at her waist and took her hand with the other. "Now," he said softly, "tell me what brings a Boston lady all the way to Silver Creek, New Mexico territory." Henrietta's eyes widened. "How did you know I'm from Boston?" Clay smiled. "Your accent, it's faint, but it's there. And those shoes they're Eastern made, even if they're worn through now." As they moved to the music, Henrietta found herself telling this stranger her story, how her father's shipping business had collapsed under mounting debts, how he had died of a heart attack upon learning they would lose everything, how the creditors had taken their home and possessions, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a letter from an aunt she'd never met offering a home if she could make it to New Mexico. 3 months on the trail, she concluded, working in kitchens and laundering clothes to earn passage on wagons heading west, and now I discover it was all for nothing. Clayton's hand tightened slightly on hers. "Not nothing, Miss Rose. You've proven you're made of stronger stuff than most men I know." When the dance ended, Clayton led her to the refreshment table and handed her a cup of punch. "You'll need a place to stay tonight." The reality of her situation came crashing back. Henrietta had spent her last coins on a stage ticket to Silver Creek. She had nothing left. "Mrs. Sullivan runs the boarding house," Clayton continued. "She's a good woman. I'll speak to her about a room for you." "I have no money to pay for lodging," Henrietta admitted, the words bitter on her tongue. "Then we'll figure something out." His calm certainty was like a lifeline. "Silver Creek takes care of its own." "I'm not one of your own," she reminded him. "You are now." His eyes met hers, steady and sure. "Anyone who makes it this far deserves a chance." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted at the entrance. A man burst through the doors, his face pale with urgency. Fire at the Miller place, their barns ablaze, and it's spreading fast. The dance hall emptied in moments as men rushed to help. Clayton turned to Henrietta. "Stay here. I'll be back once it's contained." But Henrietta Rose hadn't survived her journey west by being passive. As soon as Clayton disappeared, she hitched up her ragged skirts and followed the crowd to the edge of town, where flames illuminated the night sky. The Miller farm was chaos, men forming bucket lines from the well to the burning structures, women evacuating children from the nearby house, and animals screaming in terror. Without hesitation, Henrietta joined the women, organizing the frightened children and helping an elderly woman from the porch. When she spotted several men struggling with panicked horses in the corral adjacent to the burning barn, she rushed to help. "Open the gate," she shouted above the din. "They'll run from the fire naturally if you give them a path." One of the men turned in surprise. It was Clayton, his face streaked with soot. He nodded at her suggestion and wrenched open the corral gate, allowing the horses to thunder past to safety. For hours, they fought the fire together. Henrietta's ragged dress became even more tattered, singed in places and soaked in others. By dawn, the barn was nothing but smoldering ruins, but the house and the family inside had been saved. As the exhausted townspeople began dispersing, Henrietta found herself standing beside Clayton, both of them blackened with ash and swaying with fatigue. "You were supposed to wait at the dance hall," he said, but there was admiration in his voice. "I've never been very good at following directions," she admitted. A woman approached them, sturdy, gray-haired, with kind eyes. "You must be the newcomer everyone's talking about," she said, extending a work-worn hand. "Martha Sullivan. I run the boarding house." "Henrietta Rose," she replied, suddenly conscious of her appearance, her once ragged dress now practically in tatters, her hair falling from its pins, her face streaked with soot. "Miss Rose helped save the Miller's children," Clayton said, "and gave us the idea to free the horses before they burned with the barn." Martha nodded approvingly. "Then you'll stay with me tonight, free of charge. Any woman with sense enough to open a gate when men are too busy being heroes is welcome under my roof." "I can't accept charity," Henrietta began. "It's not charity," Martha cut her off. "It's community. Besides, I could use help with the washing tomorrow. My arthritis makes wringing sheets a misery." Henrietta recognized the offer for what it was, a chance to earn her keep without losing her dignity. "I would be grateful for the opportunity, Mrs. Sullivan." As Martha led her toward town, Henrietta glanced back at Clayton. He tipped his hat to her, a small smile playing at his lips. "Tomorrow, Miss Rose," he called after her. "I'll check on you tomorrow." True to his word, Clayton appeared at the boarding house the next afternoon, just as Henrietta was hanging the last of Mrs. Sullivan's sheets to dry. Her borrowed dress, plain but whole, was a welcome change from her ruined garments. "You look rested," he observed, leaning against the fence post. "Hard work is restorative," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Sullivan has been kind enough to employ me temporarily." "I've come with another proposition," Clayton said. "The school teacher, Miss Abernathy, is leaving us next month to marry her sweetheart in Santa Fe. The town needs someone educated to take her place." Henrietta stared at him. "You're offering me a teaching position." "You don't even know if I'm qualified. Are you?" he asked simply. I attended the Pembroke Academy for Young Ladies in Boston. I'm proficient in literature, mathematics, history, and French. Pride colored her voice for the first time since arriving in Silver Creek. Then you're overqualified, Clayton said with a grin. The town council meets tonight. I'd like to propose you for the position if you're interested. Hope blossomed in Henrietta's chest. I am interested, very much so, she hesitated. But the town hardly seems to have welcomed me with open arms. They will, Clayton assured her. Silver Creek folks are suspicious of outsiders at first, but they recognize value when they see it. After last night's fire, you've already made an impression. That evening, Henrietta found herself standing before the town council, 5 stern-faced men and 2 equally formidable women in Mrs. Sullivan's parlor. She answered their questions about her education and experience with growing confidence. When asked why they should entrust their children's education to a woman who had arrived in town in rags, Henrietta straightened her spine. "Those rags carried me across half a continent," she said firmly. "They represent my determination to build a new life, no matter the obstacles. I would teach your children that same perseverance, alongside their letters and numbers." To her surprise, this answer seemed to satisfy them. By meeting's end, she had been appointed as the new schoolteacher of Silver Creek to begin when Miss Abernathy departed in 4 weeks. As the council members filed out, Clayton waited for her on the porch. "Congratulations, Miss Rose. Or should I say teacher?" "Not for a month yet," she reminded him, but couldn't suppress her smile. "I can hardly believe it. Yesterday I had nothing. Today I have a future." "You always had a future," Clayton corrected her. "Now you just have a clearer path to it." He hesitated. "I was wondering if you might accompany me to Sunday dinner tomorrow. My sister Hannah has been pestering me to meet you." "Your sister wants to meet me?" Henrietta asked, surprised. "The whole town wants to meet the woman who arrived in rags and secured a teaching position in less than 2 days, Clayton said with a chuckle. "But Hannah's the only one bold enough to send me as her messenger." For the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, Henrietta laughed, a genuine, light-hearted sound that seemed to surprise even her. "Then I accept, Mr. Xavier. I wouldn't want to disappoint your sister." Sunday dinner at the Xavier Ranch introduced Henrietta to a side of Clayton she hadn't yet seen. Here, surrounded by his sister Hannah, his ranch hands and their families, he was relaxed and jovial, telling stories that had everyone laughing. The ranch itself was modest, but well-maintained, a testament to Clayton's hard work since inheriting it 5 years earlier after his parents' deaths. Hannah, a spirited young woman of 20, ran the household with cheerful efficiency. "Clay hasn't stopped talking about you since the dance," Hannah confided as they prepared dessert in the kitchen. "He said your dress told a better story than any book he'd ever read." Henrietta felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Your brother has a peculiar way of looking at things." "That's Clay," Hannah agreed with affection. "He sees people for who they are, not what they appear to be." She glanced at Henrietta's borrowed dress. "Though I must say you clean up nicely. Still, I wish you'd kept that other dress." "It was beyond salvaging," Henrietta said. "Mrs. Sullivan had to burn it. That's a shame. It was the first thing my brother truly noticed about you." As weeks passed, Henrietta settled into life in Silver Creek. She assisted Miss Abernathy at the schoolhouse, preparing to take over the class of 28 children ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Mrs. Sullivan offered her permanent lodging in exchange for help with the boarding house accounts, which Henrietta managed with the skill her father had taught her. And nearly every day, Clayton Xavier found reasons to be in town, checking on supplies, delivering mail from the outlying farms, attending mysterious business that seemed to coincide with Henrietta's schedule. They often walked together in the evenings, Clayton showing her the town and surrounding countryside, sharing stories of his childhood in Silver Creek. Henrietta found herself opening up about her own past, her mother's death when she was young, her father's devotion to his business and to her education, the shock of losing everything so suddenly. "I still feel guilty sometimes," she admitted one evening as they watched the sunset from the hills above town, "for leaving Boston, for not finding a way to save our home." "You were a daughter, not a miracle worker," Clayton said gently. "Your father wouldn't want you carrying that burden." "Perhaps not," she conceded, "but I wish I'd been able to save something of his, some memento." She smiled sadly. "Even my mother's locket had to be sold to pay for food." Clayton studied her profile in the fading light. "You carried something more valuable than trinkets across the country, Henrietta. You brought yourself your courage, your intelligence, your kindness. That's a far greater legacy than any locket." Henrietta turned to face him, struck by the sincerity in his voice. For a moment they sat in silence, something unspoken passing between them. The moment was broken by distant thunder. "Storm's coming," Clayton said, rising and offering his hand. "We should get back." The storm that night was fierce, lightning splitting the sky and thunder rattling windows throughout Silver Creek. Henrietta lay awake in her small room at the boarding house, listening to the rain lash against the glass. When morning dawned clear and fresh, she discovered the storm had brought more than just rain. The creek that gave the town its name had swollen beyond its banks, flooding the lower streets, including the one where the schoolhouse stood. Miss Abernathy's planned departure for Santa Fe was delayed as the town worked to clear debris and assess damage. The schoolhouse itself had suffered water damage to its floor and lower walls. "We'll need to replace the flooring and the wainscoting," the carpenter told the hastily assembled town council. "Could take a couple of weeks, maybe more." "The children can't go without schooling that long," Henrietta protested. "Not with harvest coming soon when many will be needed at home." "What do you suggest, Miss Rose?" Mayor Tompkins asked. Henrietta thought quickly. "The church has a large meeting room that wasn't affected by the flood. We could hold classes there temporarily." "The church board would have to approve," someone pointed out. "I'll speak to Reverend Lansing today," Clayton volunteered. "He's practical enough to see the necessity." By that afternoon, Henrietta and several volunteers were arranging benches in the church meeting room. When Clayton arrived with the Reverend's approval, he also brought unexpected news. "Miss Abernathy has decided not to wait for the roads to clear," he announced. "She received word that her fiancé has fallen ill. She's leaving on tomorrow's stage, come hell or high water, her words, not mine." Henrietta froze, a slate in her hands. "Tomorrow." "But I'm not prepared to take over so suddenly." "The council has full confidence in you," Clayton assured her, "and I'll help however I can." The next morning, Henrietta stood before 28 curious faces in the improvised classroom, her heart pounding. Miss Abernathy had departed at dawn, leaving only a hastily scrawled note with lesson plans. "Good morning," Henrietta began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am Miss Rose, your new teacher." A small boy in the front row raised his hand immediately. "Are you the lady who came to town in rags?" "My pa said you looked like you'd been dragged behind a wagon." Suppressed giggles rippled through the classroom. Henrietta felt her cheeks warm, but she met the child's gaze directly. "Yes, I am. My journey here was long and difficult, but worth every hardship." She looked around the room. "That will be our first lesson. Who can tell me about a journey they've experienced that taught them something important?" By lunchtime, Henrietta had won over most of her pupils with her engaging questions and genuine interest in their responses. As the children ran outside to eat their packed lunches, she sank into her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. A knock at the door revealed Clayton, holding a basket. "Hannah thought you might need sustenance for your first day." "Your sister is an angel," Henrietta said gratefully, accepting the basket. "And how did you know today would be challenging? Teaching 28 children of different ages in a makeshift classroom after a flood," Clayton raised an eyebrow. "I'd call that a fair assumption." As they shared the lunch Hannah had prepared, Clayton watched Henrietta with growing admiration. In just a few weeks, she had transformed from a desperate woman in rags to a respected teacher, facing each new challenge with grace and determination. The repairs to the schoolhouse should be complete within 2 weeks, he told her. The whole town is pitching in. This community has been far kinder than I expected, Henrietta admitted, especially after my reception at the dance. People are quick to judge and slow to reconsider, Clayton said, but you've shown them what you're made of. He hesitated. There's something else I wanted to discuss with you. The serious note in his voice made Henrietta set down her sandwich. What is it? The Founders' Day celebration is next weekend. It's the biggest event of the year in Silver Creek. He cleared his throat. I was hoping you might attend with me. Henrietta felt a flutter in her chest. As your guest, as my companion, Clayton clarified, his eyes meeting hers. If that would be agreeable to you. The warmth in his gaze told her this was more than a casual invitation. It would be very agreeable, she replied softly. Clayton's smile brightened the room. Excellent. It's quite the affair, a parade, contests, dancing. The whole town turns out. After he left, Henrietta found herself daydreaming about the celebration and about Clayton Xavier, the cowboy who had seen worth in her when she was at her lowest. The week leading up to Founders' Day was filled with anticipation. Henrietta continued teaching in the church, growing more confident each day. The floodwaters receded and repairs to the schoolhouse progressed rapidly. 2 days before the celebration, Hannah Xavier appeared at the boarding house, carrying a large parcel. I've come on a mission, she announced, laying the package on Henrietta's bed. My brother would never think of this, being a man, but you'll need a proper dress for Founders' Day. Henrietta opened the parcel to find beautiful blue fabric, the color of a summer sky. Hannah, I couldn't possibly, it's not charity, Hannah interrupted firmly. It's a gift from a friend. Besides, Clay mentioned you lost everything in Boston. No woman should have to attend the biggest celebration of the year without at least one special dress. Tears pricked at Henrietta's eyes. Thank you, I don't know what to say. Say you'll let Mrs. Peterson help you make it, Hannah replied practically. She's the best seamstress in town and she owes me a favor. 2 days of evenings spent with Mrs. Peterson resulted in a dress that made Henrietta gasp when she finally tried it on. The blue fabric complemented her auburn hair and fair skin perfectly, and the simple but elegant design suited her slender frame. You look like you belong here now, Mrs. Peterson said approvingly. Not like an Easterner at all. When Clayton arrived to escort her to the celebration, his expression upon seeing her was worth every stitch. He stood speechless for a moment, his hat in his hands. You look beautiful, he finally said. Blue suits you. Henrietta twirled slightly, showing off the dress. Your sister has excellent taste. Hannah helped, but this isn't what I'll remember. His voice grew softer. I'll always remember that first dress, the one that told me everything I needed to know about you before you spoke a single word. The Founders' Day celebration exceeded Henrietta's expectations. The entire town gathered in the newly dried Main Street, which had been decorated with bunting and lanterns. Tables groaned with food, a band played lively tunes, and contests of skill from horseshoes to pie eating entertained the crowd. To Henrietta's surprise, many townspeople who had whispered about her on that first night now greeted her warmly, congratulating her on her teaching and asking after her pupils. Several parents thanked her for keeping lessons going despite the flood. You've become quite popular, Clayton observed as they strolled through the festivities. A far cry from your first night in Silver Creek. Thanks in large part to you, Henrietta said. If you hadn't spoken up at the dance, I might have turned around and left that very night. Where would you have gone? He asked curiously. I have no idea, she admitted. I was at the end of my journey in every sense. Clayton's hand found hers, warm and strong. I'm glad you stayed. As evening fell, lanterns illuminated the town square and the band struck up a waltz. Clayton led Henrietta to the dance floor, drawing her closer than propriety strictly allowed. This reminds me of our first dance, she murmured. Though under vastly different circumstances. Not so different, Clayton replied. I was captivated then and I'm captivated now. Henrietta's heart quickened at his words. You saw something in me that night that no one else did. I saw everything, he said simply. Your courage, your dignity, your strength. That tattered dress told me you were a woman who would fight through hell to reach her destination. His voice lowered, and I knew right then that I wanted to be part of your journey. They danced in silence for a moment, the music wrapping around them like a cocoon. Henrietta, Clayton said finally, his voice serious, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. Having you here, watching you build a new life from nothing, it's been extraordinary. For me as well, she whispered, hardly daring to hope where his words might lead. He guided her away from the dance floor toward a quiet corner beneath an oak tree strung with lanterns. There he took both her hands in his. I know it hasn't been long, he began, and I would understand if you feel it's too soon, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. His blue eyes held her steadily. I love you, Henrietta Rose. I've loved you since you stood in that doorway in your travel-worn dress, holding your head high despite everything. Henrietta felt tears gathering in her eyes. Clayton, you don't have to answer now, he hastened to add. You've only just begun to establish yourself here. I don't want to rush you, yes, she interrupted, squeezing his hands. He blinked. Yes, it hasn't been long, she said, a smile breaking through her tears. And yes, I love you too, how could I not? You saw worth in me when I had nothing. You believed in me when I barely believed in myself. Clayton's face transformed with joy. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her a gentle, questioning kiss that deepened when she responded. When they finally parted, both breathless, Clayton rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he whispered. Not right away if you're not ready, but say you'll be my wife someday. Yes, Henrietta answered without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you, Clayton Xavier. They were married that Christmas, in the same church where Henrietta had taught her first classes. The schoolhouse had long since been repaired, and she had proven herself a dedicated and beloved teacher. Clayton's ranch was thriving, and Hannah had given her blessing to the union with unrestrained enthusiasm. The whole town turned out for the wedding, the same people who had once whispered behind their hands now cheering as the couple exchanged vows. At the reception, Mayor Tompkins raised his glass in a toast. To Clayton and Henrietta Xavier, proof that in Silver Creek we judge people not by their appearance but by their character. Later, as they danced together as husband and wife, Henrietta leaned close to Clayton's ear. I have a confession to make. Already, he teased, we've only been married a few hours. I saved a piece of it, she said. That old dress. Just a small scrap that wasn't too damaged. I couldn't bear to part with all of it after what you said. Clayton's eyes softened. You never cease to amaze me. I thought perhaps we could frame it, she continued, with the date we met written below, a reminder of how our story began. Our story began long before you arrived in Silver Creek, Clayton said thoughtfully. It began with every choice that led you west and every decision that kept me here, waiting for you without even knowing it. He pulled her closer. And it will continue long after that scrap of fabric has turned to dust. Is that a promise, Mr. Xavier? Henrietta asked, her eyes shining. That's a guarantee, Mrs. Xavier, he replied, sealing his words with a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. Years later, visitors to the Xavier Ranch would notice a small, framed piece of faded fabric hanging in a place of honor in the parlor. Beside it, a family portrait showed Clayton and Henrietta with their 3 children, 2 boys with their father's blue eyes, and a girl with her mother's auburn hair. When asked about the unusual keepsake, Clayton would smile and say simply, "That's the dress I'll remember forever, the one that brought me the greatest treasure of my life." And Henrietta, her hand finding his as naturally as breathing, would add, "It's a reminder that sometimes we find our true path only after losing our way completely." Together, they had built a life from nothing but courage, determination, and love, a journey that began with a woman in rags and a cowboy who saw beyond appearances to the heart beneath.